All right, I'm back. I'm going to talk about the S402 and the drive mount plate. What you're looking at now is the S402 with two 2.5-inch drives and one 3.5-inch drive installed on the plate and then put into the case. The thing to note here is that you want to orient the data and power cables coming in from this angle, from the top end. You want to plug it in that way. If you orient it the other way, it possibly will work with 2.5-inch drives, but you will not be able to get a 3.5-inch drive installed and have the cables be plugged in. One of the things to note too is since these mount flush to the bracket, you want to get straight SATA cables like these. You don't want them to be angled because the angled ones actually have a little bit extra material. This is the bottom side that has extra material. The thinner these are, the less pressure and force it's going to put on the connector itself when you actually go to install it. For the 2.5-inch drives, it's not as big a deal because you can see there's a lip where the bracket provides a gap down into the chassis, so you get a little bit extra clearance for the 2.5-inch drives. The 3.5-inch drive here is the same, but you'll see soon that there's actually another location to put a 3.5-inch drive here horizontally, so you can have two 3.5-inch drives installed at the same time directly onto the bracket. So I recommend getting these straight SATA cable power adapters and Molex, and if you're doing custom cables for your PSU, I actually recommend getting direct Molex. Just get a short pigtail of a Molex out from your 6-pin SATA or accessory interface, and then from the Molex you can daisy chain or do whatever because it can provide a lot more power than a standard SATA cable. So you can just have 1 to 4, 1 Molex to 4 SATA or 1 Molex to 2 SATA, and these are COTS, so you can buy them right from anybody, Amazon, Newegg, whomever, and then you can get them sleeved. And it's a lot less expensive than having to get your custom cables and changing them out the next time you get a new drive. So we're going to talk about the actual bracket itself. This is the correct orientation of the bracket. I'm going to move the case real quick from behind me so you can see the holes a little clearer. So the bracket itself, if you'll note, there are 3 holes. If you're looking at it the right direction, there are these 3 holes horizontally, and then there's 3 down on the bottom horizontal, and then there are 3 vertical. These are for the 3.5-inch drive mounts. That's how you know this is in the right orientation, because the left side, as you look into the case, the left side will have the 3 holes for the 3.5-inch drive mounts, and the right side will have the vertical holes for the 3.5-inch. Furthermore, there is an up and a down because there are fasteners that are inserted into this plate, and you always want the fasteners to be facing inside the case. I'm focusing here on this part. These fasteners need to be facing up as you put it into the case. Otherwise, if you install it upside down, what you'll end up with is a nice gap between the chassis and the plate itself. So the correct orientation is to have your 3.5-inch left drive be horizontal and your right drive mount be vertical. It can be a little tricky when you're installing them because you have to install the drive on this side, so you're actually flipping it over and putting the screws in. So don't get tricked. I should have done a better job at keying this thing, so there's only one way to install it. But that said, I wanted to show a couple of the different drive configurations. As you see here, what we have is the one single 3 and 2 2.5-inch drives. Now this is loose in here because I wanted to be able to remove it for the sake of being able to show you how it's a little tight in there. So with this orientation and the 3.5-inch drive here, I recommend before you put it in is to take your straight SATA power cable, plug it in to the back of the 3.5-inch drive, and then as you get it underneath here, you're going to actually have to tuck it in. A portion of this is actually going to have to be tucked in underneath the bracket for the power supply. So there's a little bit of wiggle room in there, and you're going to have to wiggle to get it under here. This is the joy of having SFF PCs, and so that's this configuration. The other configuration would be 3 2.5-inch drives, just like this. And so you can see that the data ports and the power ports are all on that side, and you can mount them just right in here. There's a lot more space in here for that. And then lastly, what I wanted to show was the 3.5-inch drive mounted horizontally. I'm going to put that right there because I only have two 3.5-inch drives. I've got to remove the other one from this bracket to show you how it would fit. So with this orientation, power and data, yay for IDE. This is an old drive, but it would be oriented something like this, and so it would go in, and then you would have a lot of space between the two drives to plug in your power. Just to show you how that would work, there's enough space in here. Lastly, one of the things that I wanted to mention were my drive stackers. If you have more 2.5-inch drives that you want to install, the drive stackers are great for that. So these are a bunch of, I think these are 12 mil 2.5-inch drives, and I've got 6 installed in one single 2.5-inch drive mounting location if I wanted to right here. Now we'll limit the length of the GPU, and I should mention that with the 3.5-inch drive, you install it all the way to the right, and I'm looking at something like right here. That'll be where its final resting place would be. I removed the PCIe adapter to make this easier for the video, just to get things in and out. But this is a Power Color Vega 56 Nano. It's about 170 mils long, so we're actually looking at another 30 or 40 mils to get to the 2.5-inch drive. With a 3.5-inch drive in this location, you actually have about 208 millimeters of clearance for your GPU. So when this guy's installed right here, you have about 208. And so you're going to have just a few more mils extra if you use the 2.5. It's probably going to be about 210 mils for your GPU length. I was going to measure it, but that's not necessary. The other thing I have is a 3.5-inch drive stacker, which would let you, if you installed 3.5-inch drive here, you could actually install one on top of it. You can do two 3.5-inch drives on top of each other here, or here actually. And I think that's almost it. The only other thing I can think of is when you do have drives installed underneath the GPU, it limits the height of the GPU. This is a 2-slot GPU. And the 2-slot will clear these 12 mil drives underneath it with quite a bit of room left over. Probably could get by with larger, taller disks underneath it. You cannot do a 3.5-inch drive in the left position. If this is not a standard height 3.5-inch drive, you can see the difference between the two. This is a standard height 3.5-inch drive. It's about an inch, and it will not clear. If you have one of these thinner 3.5-inch drives, the shorter ones, they will clear with a 2-slot GPU, but if you use the standard 3.5-inch drive, it will not clear. A 2-slot will not clear. You'd have to either modify the PCIe bracket to open up these mounting holes so that you can shift it a little, or you're going to have to just find another place to put the 3.5-inch drive, like to the right. So with the 3.5-inch drive installed here, you're limited to pretty much a 1-slot GPU or PCIe device. And if you have a shallow or less than 1-inch 3.5-inch drive, you could use a 2-slot GPU or PCIe device with the PCIe cable extension, the riser cable coming up and over. You just have to take into account the thickness of this cable as well, because it's going to be sandwiched on the back plate, And you may want to get a plastic protector for this to protect it from the back plate of the GPU, or if it has no back plate especially, because the solder points could actually poke through to the wires of this cable. So I think that's pretty much it for the mounting. You know the orientation, you've got some of the configurations and the dimensions for supported hardware when you go to use these brackets. The last thing I probably will mention is these 3.5-inch holes are supposed to be 632 screws, and I include 4 3.5-inch drive mounting screws, but these holes are actually pretty tight after the paint was on, so you may have to torque them down a bit. I would recommend screwing through them, screw the screws in through those holes without the drive, and that'll open them up a little bit. It may even hold the screws in, and you can just screw them in, line the screws to the holes on the drive, screw them in, and you're good to go. But with that said, I think that's everything. So 3.5-inch drive, you're limited to a 1 slot if you put it on the left. If you put it on the right, your PCIe device length is limited to 208 mils for 3.5-inch drives. Those are the 2 restrictions. If you have 2.5-inch drives, standard 2.5-inch drives up to, I believe, 15 mils, will work with a 2-slot GPU. You cannot have a 3-slot GPU and any 2.5-inch drives in these locations. You'll have to use one of the 2 7-mil locations located underneath the power supply. And if you use stackers, the stackers in the far right 2.5-inch drive slot location, or the mounting location rather, that will restrict your PCIe length to about the same, 210 mils on the length for your GPU. All right, thank you for watching.